How's everybody doing?
Good morning, good afternoon. We're good.
It's afternoon and different times for everybody.
Yeah, it's so good to see you both.
Great to see you again.
Yes.
So it's good that you guys have seen each other recently before I've seen you.
Yeah.
I know. We were missing you.
Exactly. Exactly. And congratulations on the edition of your festival, Aida. I keep seeing incredible things.
Thank you so much. It's just a lot of hard work, as you know.
I know, but you're the best.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
So we have a few people that have logged in.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is first, I'm just going to speak about my motivation for why I invited both of you to this discussion. As all of you know, one of the key challenges for me, especially when doing open calls for the AFF, it's always challenging to get, photographers to understand the procedure and, to help them to be more successful, not only in applying for us, but applying to, the different things that both of you are doing. So I thought it would be important this year to have a virtual discussion as it relates to, how to submit to different things, why it's important to be organized, the type of stuff that the type of stuff everyone is looking for. So to start off of, I guess, Alessia, we start with you. If you can just do a small introduction so everybody knows what you're doing and so forth, and then Elodie will continue with you.
Okay, it sounds good.
So go ahead, Alessia.
Oh, so thanks for having me, and I'm Alessia Glaviano. I'm the head of Global PhotoVogue. I worked at Vogue for the past 24 years, and in 2000, oh my God, 24 years is like a lifetime. I'm sure that maybe many of the people who are listening to us are 24 years old, but anyway, so I'm old. But then in 2011, when we transitioned to the web, and it was like a huge change for us, because I was used to do print magazine, monthly magazine, Vogue. And I decided to create this platform that it's called PhotoVogue. This platform has grown throughout the years, and today is not just a platform, it's really an incredible community, a system that tries to change the narrative of who's telling the stories and changing the narratives about exactly also how many interesting different visions there are from different parts of the world. And in 2016, I created also the festival, which is a way to go deeper into themes that I feel are relevant from both an ethical and aesthetical point of view. And now exactly it's the 9th edition of the festival, which will be in March this next year. I think it's relevant to the team today, the fact that we run open calls every year. We run open calls that are both global or sometimes regional. So yes, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessia. Elodie?
And I'm Elodie. I'm the CEO of Catchlight. So Catchlight is a visual media organization, and what we focus on really is leveraging the unique power of images to both inform audiences and communities around the world, and also connect them, engage them into both understanding the issues at stake, but also prompting change. And we do so with two different programs. One is our Global Fellowship Program, which you were a part of, Aida, and I still very much a part of. And that call is open right now. So we offer $30,000 grants that last for a year. And we award excellent visual storytellers that are committed to long-form stories, but are also really looking to engage audiences and or build institutions. So the way in which we're thinking about this investment is really thinking in individuals that are pushing the field forward and giving back. And this grant really came from, the change that we've seen in the media ecosystem. It's not enough today to say, okay, I'm going to work on this story and I'm hoping that National Geographic or the Washington Post is going to publish it, because the reality is that less and less of those avenues are available. So we need to think about new ways to get important stories in front of the public. And that's really what this grant has been structured for. And then the other program that we have is actually looking to kind of reseed visual journalism and the power of visual journalism at the local level here in the United States for now. And so we're helping place visual journalists in museums across the United States. So we just opened up to 20 positions to be filled in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I respect about both of you is the fact that you make every effort that there's as much diversity in the submissions and also in the selection. And, having seen both of your strategies of how you push that agenda. And from my end, what I wanted to know is, as it relates to your own personal experiences, what are the common qualities of a successful submission that, you are looking for, that you have, the strategy, especially for the photographers, on how to put that together?
Thank you. Maybe I go first. So my suggestion really is for photographers not to do a thing like one size fits all. It's like whenever you submit something, of course it can be that you submit the same work to different organization, grants, festival, but you should tailor what you submit to what's been asked by that organization. So, I think being cohesive, having a clear vision, it's also very important to know, like, sometimes photographers are their worst enemies, because I do see, like, I know some of them and I know maybe their work, and sometimes I'm like, why did they submit these images which are not the strongest in the project, or why is the sequencing wrong? It's like the sequence is so important. So again, it's like you can have talent, but then talent has to be organized and becoming professional, right? So it's like, how do you transition from just being talented to also being someone that you feel you can work with, you can give assignments, and at the end, it's about all of these things together. So you gotta have a clear vision. There has to be a cohesive storytelling. The technicals are right. What you write must be right. Do not go around and talk about from the beginning of your lifetime until today. It's like, it's gotta be what's asked of you, right? So I don't know, maybe I said too many things, but then we can go more into details, but this is what I feel is a successful submission.
Elodie?
Yeah, and I think similarly for us, I think it's really understanding what each organization is about and what they're really looking for. So in other words, for Catchlight, as I said, our emphasis is really not just on the project that you might want to be doing, but actually how are you going to bring that project back to the public or the audience that you're trying to serve. And so, I think what we see a lot of through the application are really strong projects, but then the distribution methods are like, well, I hope to get a book published, or I hope that National Geographic picks up. And to my point, that's not necessarily what we're looking for. So it's looking at the whole application in terms of like, why are you applying for this particular organization, and what support are you really looking for, and really thinking through that piece and what each organization has to offer.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, one of the issues that I keep seeing coming up, not just in Africa, but I think the global South, is the understanding of building a portfolio. Photographers will submit a bunch of singles and not realizing, like, you have to build a portfolio and have, a storyline as it relates to, like, different topics. So that's one issue. The other is also sometimes photographers are only working for a specific activity instead of actually realizing like you have to have all these diversity, especially for young photographers. One thing I encourage, a lot of the students is I said to them, you have to build, a collection a month. You have time to do that because, as you said, Alessia, you don't know where the opportunity is going to come from. So for me, why is that important? Or if you can sort of explain how you guys view a collection, because I'm sure you get some submissions of disjointed ideas sometimes that is not a completed package, but just to try to get the young photographers to understand why it is, to have this understanding of like selection, editing, all these components, especially when they're submitting to you guys.
Well, it's what you're saying is it's very important, and I feel again, this idea of selecting and editing, unfortunately, is such a big issue for some photographers out there. And I wish there was an easy way to speak about this, and there isn't, because it all comes down to practice, So I think you should sit down with your work again, put it together and try to sequence it. And, like for instance, what I do, first of all, it depends what kind of work we're talking about. Is it documentary work? Is it artistic work? Because of course we are following different guidelines for the two, right? So if it's a documentary work, of course you're telling a story, and you also need, for instance, to somehow respect also maybe the timeline of what you're talking about, right? But then, for instance, for the sequencing, I always say, you have maybe 100 images. You go to the 100 images the first time, and you just select the strongest one, right? Then you look at the strongest one, and you think, is this the story? Do I have here all the chapters of the story that I need to tell? Otherwise, you go back, and then from those you select again. And then the sequencing, you start with the first image and the last image, and then you put the ones in between. And the way I work for sequencing, it's mostly related to textures, colors, and lines, okay? So that's how I sequence, unless, again, there is an issue of respecting a timeline. So yes, and it sometimes it's also about going back to the work times and times again, and sometimes to have space between, and time, between the taking the pictures and then the editing. I think it's very important too, because you sit down with the thing, you think about it, it's not too fresh, you go back to it. Like there are photographers who go back years after what they, like for instance, Gregory Cruzon. I remember talking to him, and he's a huge, incredible artist. And he did this, maybe his first work that he did, which was on fireflies when he was younger, and he never published it. And then he went back to it after 40 years, and he decided he was going to do a book with it. So again, work can also take on different meanings, different things with time. So I know it's hard to judge and to work and edit our own personal work, but it's part of being a photographer and an artist.
Elodie?
Yeah, I think for us, we're really looking at people who are looking in depth into stories, and so again, there is a certain commitment to time that needs to be shown there, and kind of going back to the stories over and over and over again. So, for example, Anastasia Taylor-Lind is one of our fellows this year, and she's been covering, the conflict in Ukraine for over 10 years now, when it was, at the peak, and also when it was less so. And I think it's about letting that story unfold over time. What I would say to young photographers is really find topics that are close to you, and spend time with them and let that voice sort of emerge. And the only way to do that is by spending time with it. So I can think of another one of our fellows, Rupa, who documented over time, like the village that her parents came from in India, where she spent a lot of the summers, and sort of like seeing again, like in time. And I don't think she knew when she started what that work was about. In many ways, it was just about documenting this disappearing, connection that she had in some ways to where her family came from. And all of the markers that she knew kind of slowly fade away as people either grew older or passed away, right? And that's a very close story, and she didn't know where it was going, but when we looked at the work together, it just kind of made sense as the story of migration and kind of lost origins, and was incredibly powerful and moving and beautiful. But sometimes it takes time for those things to kind of emerge.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like in my teaching, the one thing that I'm always pushing, regardless of whether you're doing fine art or photojournalism, is always to have like your collection of base images, So for example, the one thing that I always say, especially for photojournalists, is that whatever that topic that they're shooting, they should start with a base of 100 images. And then from the 100, edit it down to a 50, from the 50, edit down to a 20, 10, 5, and then you have that single image that is really reflective of the whole collection. That way, when there's different opportunities, you already have that stuff organized. But I find that often young photographers are not imagining their work in the physical form, because we exist in a very digital world. And to me, like, everyone should be aspiring to be in an exhibition, to see their work printed. And I think the final testament of a photographer is to produce a book, So if you have that 100 images ready, that just makes your editing simpler to go to a review or to have other people reviewing your work to sort of sift through all of that. But the key thing it always comes down to, I think, is like being organized. And I think that's the element that is quite key. And I know there's photographers probably in this group who don't have access to other photographers to review their works and so forth, but there's many opportunities to be able to engage in portfolio reviews, because those are really important components that I find not enough, especially photographers from Africa, are not engaging enough and participating in these things. But outside of that, I wanted to know from both of you, how often do you find applicants who have done like an incomplete or a poorly written bio or description? How is that important in addition to the images? For example, for me, there's nothing I hate like untitled work with no description, or we're asking for an artist statement or some kind of information and we only get like one line. But how is that also important? Because I think photographers don't realize like the written word is also just as important as the visual portfolio that you're submitting.
Should I go first? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, of course, dear, I mean, yeah, you're saying it's so important, even because otherwise it looks like it's sloppy and you don't care. Again, it's just how much do you want what you're doing? How much? It's like you gotta be excellent. There's so much competition out there. You can be a genius, so talented, but today, it's especially now that there is this thing that everyone is his own publisher because we have social media, You gotta be. I know it's a lot to ask, especially for an artist, but not for a journalist. It shouldn't be. But you must be able to talk about your work. You must be able to write about your work. And what you were saying, Aida, is so important. It's like there's nothing more important than creating community and trying to have feedbacks from people in the industry. I know it's hard, but today there are so many opportunities to network, right? Because there are fairs all over the world, there are festivals all over the world, there are, portfolio reviews, which are mostly digital, now that we have Zoom. So there you have all the instruments to try to get feedbacks. That's so important. So do that, try to get as much feedback as you can, because sometimes it's like someone else is going to show you a way you didn't even think about it, But again, you got to be precise. You have to love what you're doing and respect what you're doing. And the way to love it and respect it is to be 100% on all of the things related to the work. So not just the images, but how you describe the images. What are the images about? What about you? You know?
Yeah. Elodie?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we look at the writing as much, if not, I mean, equally and sometimes weighted more. I mean, that's ultimately what's going to make the final decision, because, again, it is as much about the distribution plan. So even if the images are incredible, if the writing is not like more than solid, we just won't consider the project. That's a big articulation of what you're trying to do and why is absolutely key.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I always say to young photographers is that, you know, rejection has to be your best friend. You know, there's a lot of photographers that submit only once, and because they didn't get in, then they give up. But, you know, as both of you are saying, I mean, this is a very tough industry, and as more photographers are entering into the market, and as we know, you know, a lot of shifting happening in the market, I find that for some photographers, it's like, just because they haven't gotten the yes in the first round. I mean, for me, I've had to go through many rejections just to arrive at a specific point. But from your end, I mean, when you're looking at work, is there something specific that attracts you towards it? Or, you know, I mean, I've seen the approaches of both of you, but within, you know, for example, I know for you, Elodie, there's specific topics that you guys focus on, and at least say you have a theme as well each year that you have. But within that, I think, you know, I'm realizing now that both of you are looking at photography in the innovation aspect, you know, a visual language that's unique and so forth. But if you can sort of talk about where that trend has gone now, because as we know, for example, photojournalism has shifted a lot, you know, and there are many, you know, there are many challenges within it, but then there's also, you know, specific opportunities that photographers can look into. But I'm just curious to know from both of you, just how you approach the works that you're looking at, and what is sort of the process.
I don't want to go first. So you go.
Okay,
because I'm always going first. It's like, no, you start.
So first of all, on the not getting it once and then stopping applying, I think to your point, Aida, it's really important to keep applying. I mean, understanding, for example, for the Global Fellowship, we get close to 400 applicants every year, and, you know, we have 3 grants. So the competition is really fierce, and we have had people, you know, get really close before and not getting it, and then applying again and understanding what we were looking for better and getting it. And those are, like, you know, really important names in photography. So I would really just consider it almost like an exercise, and maybe something that can help your articulating your vision, like, rather than saying, okay, well, I'm applying for this because I want to get it. Yes, of course you want to get it, but at the end of the day, just think about it as an exercise that allows you to articulate what you're trying to do, and maybe do some of the editing work that then can be applied to other things. So I think that's maybe one useful framework, and like that, maybe rejection also is a little less stinging. I remember when I applied myself for the JSK fellowship at Stanford, you know, that's really the way that I approached it, which was like, I'm at an interesting moment in my life and my career, and I kind of want to articulate what I'm interested in learning and what I want to do next. And it was just a very useful exercise, and it kind of took the pressure off of, am I going to get it or not? And if nothing else, I had like this incredible document that allowed me to think through that, through those steps. So it was a useful exercise for me, regardless of outcome. So that's the first thing. In terms of like how we look at work, we look at like all kinds of work, and, you know, they straddle like photojournalism to fine art. They straddle like, you know, covering conflict zones to the environment. I think for us, very much it is about, again, like how are you thinking about the audiences that you're trying to serve, and how are you going to get to them? And a lot of it has to do with, bringing new forms of informing the public, as well. So thinking through, okay, are you going to think through, exhibitions, social media, whatever it might be, that will kind of allow to get to those audiences and maybe test new models as well.
Okay, Alessia?
Well, again, I second what Elodie was saying about the rejection aspect. If I may add, you also have to consider that usually we have juries when we do open calls, because it would be very arrogant to say we choose everything on our own. So, for instance, I make sure to be very, very inclusive in the jury selection. Like, I want people from every kind of background, from every kind of culture, because there can be bias always in the way we look at work. And I don't want to be, maybe favoring some work over other just because I don't understand it. So you have to, first of all, also consider that, First of all, there is a thematic. So maybe your work is incredible, but maybe it doesn't fit the theme of the year. Then there is this idea of a jury. Everyone can be biased. Everyone can, have preferences in terms of and different taste on work. So never be discouraged. And with that said, of course, I think that it can be said that there is today a PhotoVogue aesthetic, if you think about it. And I think it is a total encounter of ethics and aesthetics, which is what I always say, but I really care about this. We are trying since day one to change the narrative. And I feel that we do that with extremely powerful aesthetics. But is it me? What is this sound? Do you hear it? What?
It's raining here.
Wow, it's super raining. I love it. So anyway, I was saying, it's the idea of marrying powerful aesthetics that are never though devoid of meaning. It's like, even when we're talking about fashion or art, I consider that these new artists that are the new artists of today to be more like aware of what's going on in the world. So somehow their work also speaks about it, although maybe it's not about certain issues, but somehow those issues are in the work, because maybe the models are not all white, skinny, and tall, and it's like there are different ways in which you can incorporate something about the world, even in work that is not about the world, So I feel that these are two things that I always care about. It's like the aesthetics must be stunning. You gotta have a clear vision. You gotta have your own vision. It's like, I don't care I don't like when I see things that are too derivative, that they're like copying someone else, or anyway, trying to be that someone else. It's like, who is you? What is your vision? And, I want to see things with vision. And then within these people with vision, we're talking about having a strong way to tell a story that it's cohesive and makes sense, makes sense from an aesthetic point of view. So these two things I feel are really important. So I would say aesthetics and awareness of the world, together. It's like what you do, Aida, is actually an epitome of what I'm saying, right? Because your work is extremely artistic, but it's loaded with meaning. Okay?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I just wanted to know if, you guys look at a lot of images, and a lot of different submissions. Have you noticed any changing trends, for example, in the past 5 years, or anything that you have noticed that is shifting?
Well, I think, for instance, I think there was a time not long ago where everything was a bit too much like documentary approach to things. And I felt it was getting a bit boring, meaning everyone was doing that kind of thing, even in fashion. And now there's more diversity also there to show also different approaches to things. So maybe there's more diversity in the aesthetic diversity in the work, which I really like. I also think that finally we are seeing more creators from countries that weren't sitting at the table before, and now they're starting to, and this is so interesting. So I would say these are the most interesting things that I am seeing.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, what we're seeing is because there is a shift in how photography is being produced, meaning moving away from commissions that come from big publications, more into personal projects that are grant funded, and where there is more and more people that sustain themselves with those grants. That also means that a lot of the long form projects are actually becoming more personal. So they have more freedom once they get those grants, which is really hard and extremely competitive, but they get a lot more freedom in like the type of work that they end up doing. And so that means that I think there is a shift to longer form storytelling and a shift to more personal and in some ways more artistic work. So those lines are getting blurred more and more.
So interesting, Elodie. So true what you're saying. Right.
Right, because before it was mostly commissioned by publications. So if the economy and it's not anymore.
I mean, Elodie, if you can just talk a little bit about, just to describe, because some people might not know what long form is, but if you can also speak about why it's important also as photographers work in long form projects.
Yeah, long form means, spending a month or even like years on a particular topic or subject. So that's what we mean, I guess, by long form. So it's not just, the number of images that you produce, but really thinking through a topic over time and spending, at times years around it. So that's the difference between, it's interesting because for Catchlight, we work on like kind of all the levels of time because we work with staff photographers at local news publications. A lot of those photographers get sent out and it's like, you cover the thing today and the thing the next day. And it's kind of those daily assignments that are coming back. And so we see a lot of that, but then with our global fellows, what we see is people spending, a year at a time, 2 years at a time, 10 years, like Anastasia, on a particular topic that she has, sort of self-funded. And those are things that, again, like you kind of let evolve over time. And yeah, what we're seeing is because the economy, you were going from working for Time magazine or National Geographic, where there is like very clear guidelines from an editorial perspective and expectations in terms of like the type of coverage that would come back, to projects that are much more self-funded, then yes, there is a lot more freedom and a lot more experimentation, of even formats like, medium format, film as opposed to digital and all of that.
Super interesting. Let me answer this question because I think you see that also the way you are framing the question, in my opinion, is the wrong way to frame it. Why? You're asking what do we look for, right? Now, in my long experience, you don't have to please anyone, meaning the way to success is to do things that are meaningful and relevant to you. So if you start by trying to do what you think is relevant for someone else, you're gonna hit the wall most of the times. So And this, I think it goes for anything that you want to do in life. It's like whenever I talk to students, like young students, I always tell them, you should start by trying to focus on what are your passions in life. What is something that you believe in? What is something that wakes you up at night, or it could be anything you're passionate about. And then try to think what could be the jobs or the things related to these things I'm passionate about, and ask yourself, am I talented? What am I talented in doing? So you put all of this together. You try also to understand who could be the people who have the same passions as you, and trying to get a community behind it. But again, it's about you. So if you place yourself instead on the way that what do the people want, I'm going to try to give them what they want. It doesn't work that way, Usually, what are common mistakes photographers make okay, so I was trying to answer that. Okay, thank you.
So I'm trying to deal with the rain noise. So
no, I liked it. And now that I know that it's the rain, okay, but I was like,
what did it sound like to you?
I thought it was me, I was like.
No, it's me. It's raining heavy in Abidjan. So I wanted to also talk about like how important networking and marketing is. The one thing that I always tell students, when you set up your social media account, please don't put your nickname, because nobody's looking for you under your nickname. You need to have a digital footprint. And I suspect that both of you are also looking at social media for new talent.
Absolutely. This is so important. It's like the first thing that I say, curate your Instagram account, because nowadays editors, they go to that before anything else. It's like, even when I get, I could get thousands of submissions, right? And usually I look at the submission, I always ask to put also the social media account. And if you don't do it, it's not a good sign, because, you also want to see how credible someone is, right? So you go and look at how consistent is the work. So, you got to edit. You got to edit your Instagram account. Your best work must always be on top. You must say, where are you based on the top? Like, where are you based? If you're traveling, where are you traveling to? Your name is like, this is fundamental, because we do live in this world of social media. So there isn't you can say, it's not fair, but that's the way it is. So if you work with imagery and visual media, that is so important. I can't stress it. And you have to clean it up. It's like you're not in school. So the idea to show like where you come from, meaning from an artistic point of view, like the beginning of what you were doing and what you're doing now. No, you're just showing where you are at now. Don't show that you were talented 10 years ago, but not already there. No, it's like you need to just keep the work that you feel confident with today, that represents you today. And it's your professional way. So it's not about, unless, your life, it's also part of the deal. It's part of you being, it's like showing out, but you have to keep it professional, So important, Aida. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the time period that I started photography. I mean, there's no internet. We were like sending a negative and scans of our work or printouts of our works to editors. And now that technology has made everything super accessible, this is why I think that a lot of photographers from the global south have entered into these different sort of festivals and different grant opportunities, because it's just having that internet connection and having an Instagram profile is very helpful. But the one thing that I realized for a lot of young photographers is that globally, not only in my continent, is that photographers are not doing enough research to really look at what everyone is doing. Everyone is just sort of stuck in their bubble. So I wanted to know from both of you, like, why research is so important in developing your work, your practice. Sometimes there'll be photographers that they think they have a very unique idea and somebody has already done it 10 times already. But why is research also an important component as opposed to just going out and shooting?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. I mean, I think you want to Aida's point, make sure that you're not, doubling the work, or that you can cover something that other people have covered, but that you're bringing like a different perspective on it, and so you can dial into a special approach that can be an artistic approach or a certain like narrative approach. So meaning you are going to, for example, I'm just thinking about like a concrete example, but you know, there is a lot of like war or conflict coverage out there, where Anastasia is unique is that she has taken this approach of like, oh, I want to document the lives of people leaving, you know, 5 kilometers from the front line in Ukraine, and I'm coming back to the same families over and over and over again over time. And so that is a different perspective from you know, just covering the conflict. And not that covering the conflict is not important, but it's just like a different angle into it that is unique to her, and that was particularly interesting to her, right? And you can see how that angle can then be applied to other countries. So I think like really looking at, you know, what has been done and how do you want to approach a particular story. So it doesn't mean because the story has been covered that there isn't like another angle that can be uncovered.
So I think
so there's questions on there. If you guys can respond to the questions that are on there. I think.
Yeah, first of all, on the recurring grants competition and festival, it's so full online of resources that tell you exactly the grants that, like, for instance, I know that Picture, something like this, PH Museum always has like a newsletter or everything with all the grants of demands, all the festivals around the world. So yeah, you can find everything is online. I fear that maybe because everything is online today, then people don't find anything because it's just it has become so easy to search that no one looks for it, you know. And it makes me wonder. I remember I used to spend hours and days into libraries to look at books, you know, to get my references. Because as you, Aida, and I'm thinking, you know, I was like, I grew up that there wasn't the internet, but you know, today with the internet, going back to what you were saying, Elodie and Aida, I keep seeing sometimes young people making storyboards, mood boards, whatever, and they take images like from I don't know, what is it, Picture, what's the name, whatever, and they don't even know what they're getting, who the photographer behind the image is. Like, do your research, because as you were saying, it doesn't mean you can't explore a concept, but you can't, you know, not even know what you're being referencing to, who is inspiring you, and all of that. It's a question chapter. Are there ideological, material, or technical limits? No, the limits are about good taste.
So Elodie, if you can answer the question, there's one that I think it's Joanna Baptiste. She's asking, what are the common mistakes that photographers make when applying for grants? And as we go down, I just want to answer all the questions that they're asking. I think there's 2 for you, Elodie.
Yeah, I mean, I think the common mistakes we talked about, I mean, the most common is like to not take the writing portion seriously. That's like the one that we see over and over and over again. So meaning it's not just about the images that you're going to put in there, but really thinking through the entire application and taking every part of it seriously. So I think for me, that's the most common one.
And then there's a question about you know, buzzwords. Are buzzwords expected in as part of the application? For me, no, but I'm sure Elodie, you have something to say.
No, definitely no buzzwords. No, what we want to know is that, you know, there is real effort that is going through. Like, we're not trying to match any trends or anything. We're trying to like chart our new path. So we want to make sure that people are outlining approaches that A, make sense, and B, are realistic. So like, no need to use buzzwords.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, between the 3 of us, we've seen a lot of work, and you can always tell when something's authentic and when something is forced. And I believe true artistry, is being authentic to yourself first, and not making work that you think we're gonna be happy with, So a lot of the times, I think Alessia, as you were saying, photographers will have like great work hidden somewhere, but then they're sending us stuff that, the gem is like stored somewhere else. So I think for any application, any grant competition, if you have something that's authentically you, something that you feel passionate about, that stuff actually reads through the image, So for example, in my selection process, like I know that at times I will exhibit photographers that nobody knows of, or they've never had an exhibition, because I see the potential, also because I see something pure in that form. And often, after they've had the experience of exhibiting, then their career goes to the next step. Someone here has asked about, how to leverage the experience of participating in, in grants, competitions, or festivals to build long-term relationships with industry stakeholders and further their careers. Again, for me, it's about consistency. If you look at all the people that have succeeded, it's not a one-time thing. Usually the one-hit wonders, you can tell right away, they disappear quickly, But if you have to make a decision, you want a short-term career or a long-term career. The long-term career takes a lot of effort. Being a photographer is not an easy thing. I always tell people, you want to be famous and rich, don't be a photographer. This is the most difficult thing you can get into. So it's like, you have to be in it for the right reasons. And I'm sure both of you have things to say as it relates to that, of how to, build a network, how to grow from one opportunity instead of just stopping because you received one award or you've gone into one festival. There's a lot of work that goes into continuing that career.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great question, actually. I really like that question. And I like the framing, which is to think about it in terms of, it kind of goes back to think about it as an opportunity to get in front of people as opposed to just getting the thing. And when you look at grants, as Aida mentioned and Alessia, there is a jury, generally speaking. And that means that these people have actually looked at your work, most likely. And so that is something that you can build on in terms of like, hey, I submitted to name the grant photo festival, and I'd love to hear like what, in terms of like, you can go back to the organization and say, I'd love to hear more about my application. They might or might not have the time to come back to you, but usually for us, like with finalists, if they ask us the question, then we'll be, we'll answer the question as to like, what worked and what might not have worked as well. And then two, looking at the list of jury and like seeing, if you can stay in touch or follow them on Instagram and get your work in front of them and like kind of build on those relationships. There, behind every one of those opportunities, there is a really broad network of people who care, because usually they volunteer their time to actually look at work. And, they're not getting rich doing that. So they are doing it because they want to find talent.
So going on to the next question, for those that are asking, and there's a question here about the recurring grants competitions. Like I said, you guys are the generation that has access to the most information. Everything is a Google search away. Even there's a website, I can't remember, but there's a whole website about all the festivals happening around the world that you can apply for. And these are free festivals to submit to. So for that, it's just, you have to do, the legwork of it. And then you also have to see like, who are the photographers that you like, because most of them, they will be connected to some sort of organization, or they would have won a competition and so forth. So it's always good to research all these things. And even on our website, on Africa Photo Fair, we have a list of the different grants and opportunities in the opportunities section. But for that, it's just a research away. And depending where you live or what region you're in, for example, for Africa, there are specific grants that are accessible. That's what we put up on our site. For those living in Europe, there's a difference between global and regional competitions that you can submit to. Now, Alessia, this is for you. There's a photographer that says, as a conceptual photographer, are there ideological, material, or technical limits that must be respected for a project to be considered a photographic project or an artistic work in general?
No.
Exactly.
If we're talking about art, there are no limits. I mean, common sense and good taste, but I also like the art that can be controversial, and I know it's not the correct time in history to be able to be controversial. We left that, unfortunately, to people like Trump, and the progressive people like us are afraid to be controversial because then you're canceled. But yeah, art is also about being controversial, in my opinion.
And Elodie, somebody asked how to improve their storytelling, if you have any tips for them.
I mean, that's a really broad question, but I think, practicing. I mean, storytelling is about telling a story. So ultimately, it is about really doing the work, doing the research, going deep inside and keeping at it, over and over and over again.
A lot of photographers take for granted YouTube. I mean, you can find everything on YouTube. I mean, if you want to build your portfolio, the technical, all these things, I mean, there's so much resource on YouTube. So I would encourage you to really use that platform. Okay, so this one I'll answer. It says, how to balance applying to these opportunities while developing my craft and working on paid assignments. This is the reality. What I teach is that you have to do work for your stomach, which pays your rent and so forth, and you have to do work for your heart. So whatever money that you're getting, you need to invest it into your personal projects until you reach a point where your personal project is what's earning you income. So this is the reality of every creative, is that you have to do so many different odd things. I mean, me, I think I've done so many styles of photography possible before I found, sort of my path within it.
This one I like. For body of work, photo series, is it important that they're edited in the same way or same coloring? This is a very interesting question because it depends. It's like the market, meaning the industry, meaning I think that tends to reward people whose work is immediately recognizable. This doesn't mean, though, that, I mean, it can be also a prison, because it's like you have that style and you can't get away from it, because then people are not going to, they want to be reassured that Aida does Aida, Paolo Roversi does Paolo Roversi, But at the same time, I think, again, we go back to the consistency that we were talking about. So I think different topics, different works can be approached with different aesthetics, depending on the subject matter. So it really depends, it's like it could be that you go in a place that has vivid colors and you want to render that with that, or a place that the climate there makes you think that maybe black and white, for instance, is the best choice, to approach it. It's like, but you gotta have a consistency somehow that is you, even if,
No, I mean, I think the most difficult thing to develop after you've learned the technical and the structuring of storytelling is the style.
Yeah.
And that style has to be unique to you. You know what I'm saying? It means it's like even like any painter or any filmmaker, for example, we know Wes Anderson film because we know the style of Wes Anderson, so that is a very important component, but it takes time. A lot of photographers try to arrive at that point quickly without understanding the technical aspect of it, without understanding the business and all these components. Elodie, there's some French questions towards the bottom. I would really appreciate it if you can respond in French, since I don't think anybody wants to hear my French. And then we're going to wrap up in like 3 minutes.
Quels sont les critères les plus importants que les juges examinent dans les concours? So that's like what are the most important criteria that the judges look for in competitions? I mean, it really, ça dépend de chaque concours et de chaque compétition. Ils ont chacun leurs critères. Donc, à nouveau, je dirais, regardez, faites vos recherches sur quels sont les critères de ces compétitions. Mais de manière générale, à nouveau, d'excellentes images et le contexte, c'est-à-dire tout ce qui est légende, etc., sont absolument clés pour ces compétitions.
Wow, that was quick. You answered all the questions because there was like a bunch of questions.
Quels sont les meilleurs festivals pour les photographes émergents dans la photographie documentaire et le journalisme? Il y a énormément il n'y a pas énormément de festivals autour de la photographie documentaire et du journalisme. Il y a Visa pour l'image à Perpignan. Arles a aussi beaucoup de photographie documentaire et de journalisme. Donc, en termes de festival, c'est probablement parmi les plus importants. Il y a aussi Photoville à New York qui accueille aussi des photographes émergents. Donc, trois bons festivals dans ce genre-là.
And then there's the last, I think, did you read the one? Quelles sont les critères les
tendances? Oui, I did this one. Quelles sont les tendances actuelles qui intéressent les organisations subventionnaires ou les festivals? À nouveau, je pense que de manière générale, on est ouvert à toutes les tendances et pas nécessairement sur la tendance ou la nouvelle vague. L'important, c'est que le travail soit sincère et authentique.
Okay, I think that's about it for now. So for me, the key thing to wrap it up is just to make everybody understand that you're in an extremely competitive field, which means you have to work super hard. There's no easy way through it. I believe you ladies will agree on this. And everything is really about being persistent. That's it. You know, I can't remember, I think Alessia or Elodie, you know, when your work when it doesn't pass a specific phase, people will remember your work, you know what I'm saying? So you don't know who the jury is. The jury could be someone that will actually have an interest in your work and give you different opportunities. So even, for example, for the World Press has a section in the back of the book that lists all the country submissions. You know, a lot of editors get that book and they see that list. So to me, it's just, you know, it's really about understanding not only about how to progress your work, but also doing the research to know exactly what is really out there in the market. Not to limit yourself. I don't care where you're from, but not to limit yourself with only looking at work just only from your region or your continent or what have you. You need to look at what's happening globally. And all these things are accessible through just basic research and looking at, even if you do a basic thing of looking at all the festivals around the world and seeing what the festivals are selecting, what are they, you know, the type of photographers, that will open your world up into seeing, you know, a global perspective on photography. So I think that's about it. I'm not going to take any more questions, but I don't know if there's any last words from the two of you.
No, just that thank you for having us, and thank you, Aida, for the incredible work that you do. It's so, you know, it's not easy to find someone who's so artistically creative and at the same time so pragmatic and like also wanting to help others. So that's really great about you. Thank you.
Yeah, so grateful. Thanks for your incredible generosity of spirit, Aida, and like for, you know, helping so many emerging photographers. And we're really looking forward to seeing your applications and your work. So really I encourage everyone to keep going and applying.
No, thank you so much, ladies. I mean, you both have been a big supporter of everything that I'm doing. So people think it's only me alone pushing through, but I have people like you that push forward certain agendas.
Well, it's a lot of you, but we all love each other. There's a lot of love.
Exactly.
So thank you so much. I wish you a good day. Well, Elodie, it's morning for you. And Alessia, you're in a different time zone like me. But I look forward to seeing both of you soon.
Me too.
Very
Bye,
much
everyone.
So.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao. 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 Ciao.
Bye.